Hello and welcome back to the German Imperial Soldier. Today's video we do have the Americans going against the British. Now this one is going to be an interesting one because for the Americans we have the Tillman IV version 2 of his ultimate battleship design, whilst for the British we have the G3 battlecruiser and the N3 class of battleship. Anyways, let's get straight into the comparison. As usual, we have to start the ship comparison by just kind of showing off the ships really quickly. So, for this initial comparison, we're going to start off by showing off their main guns. Now, both of these ships do have the same caliber main guns, those being 457mm main guns. Now, 457mm is also known as 18 inches. If you know the Yamato class, the Yamato had 18.1-inch main guns, and those equal to 460 millimeters. So, the Tillman has 5 turrets, 3 guns in each turret, 457mm guns. Now, I think that these would be labeled the Mark 7 guns, but if you don't think so, you're free to say so, but I feel like I'm not 100% sure about that because there's never been a classification for American 457s. The British had 3 turrets, 3 guns in each turret, 457mm. Now, the naming convention on British guns is a little bit different, and I do not fully know it. In my opinion, I think that the Tillman would get the edge with its main guns. Next up, we do have to compare their secondary guns. The Tillman has the same secondary guns as a lot of American ships at the time, those being 127mm guns. Now, unlike the standard American ships, these guns would be in casemates, which means they have a more limited arc. Now, for the N3, it has 8 turrets, 2 guns in each turret, 152mm guns, and 6 casemate 120mm guns. Now, in my opinion, the 127s have proven them to be effective for the Americans, but I can see the case that the 152s are a better secondary gun. But I believe that the Tillman's 127s are still a solid secondary gun, which in their ballistics category is a little bit less, but the range and the equipment that the Americans have for their engineering does give it the slight edge. So it's a very close battle for the secondaries, but in my opinion, it goes to the Tillman by barely a percentage point. Next up, we have anti-air guns. Now, the Tillman has Bofor guns, whilst the N3 has those previously mentioned 120mm guns, and the 4 10 guns in each turret, 2-pounder, also known as pom-poms. The effectiveness of the Bofors cannot be understated, so in my opinion, no matter how many Bofors they have, even if they have the same amount of Bofors as they do 120s, those being 6 turrets, 4 guns in each turret, Bofors, the maximum class would still win in the anti-air category. Next up, we have torpedoes. Now, the first edge that we can give to the N3 is its torpedoes, because it does have torpedoes, clocking in at 24.5 inches. The maximum class was not designed with any torpedoes, giving the edge to the N3. Next up, we have the armor. Now, we can only go from a certain amount of armor value because the Tillman only gave us a certain amount. For the Tillman, we have 406mm belt compared to the 381s on the N3 class. The barbette is both 381mm, but the tower for the Tillman is 457mm compared to the N3's 381mm. This means that the only place that both of them are equal is the barbette. Everything else, the edge goes to the Tillman. Next up, we have the top speed. Now, I believe this edge goes to the maximum class battleship because it is 25.2 knots compared to the N3's 23 knots. Why is it such a low speed? I have no idea, but that is what it was designed as. Next up, we have the weight. This is the final category that we always judge them off of. Now, the weight is what is a more effective ship to its weight. And in my opinion, the maximum class battleship is more effective for its weight because it carries more main guns. It also has a lot of anti-air defenses. And also we can see that in the number that their weights are. For the Tillman, it's 80,000 tons, and for the N3, it's 49,300 tons. I believe that the N3 does suffer because even though it's a good weight, it does not have this top speed to actually support any proper engagements. It wouldn't be able to catch up to any enemy ship that's trying to flee, and any enemy ship could stay out of the range of the 457mm. Now, we've talked about one of the ships, the N3. Next up, we do have the G3 compared to the Maximum. Now, the G3 is a battlecruiser. It looks pretty much the same as the N3, so we can get through this comparison a little bit faster. The G3 class of battleship has a main gun caliber of 406 millimeters. And we already know the maximum battleship's guns, so we can give the edge to the Maximum. Next up, we have the secondary guns. Now, the secondary guns seem the exact same as the N3 class of battleship, meaning that still it's a very close battle, but now that the G3 doesn't have the armor values of the Maximum, it goes a little bit more to the Maximum's favor. Next up, we have the anti-aircraft guns. Now, the anti-aircraft guns are very similar to the N3 and the G3, the only difference being that it's 4 turrets, 8 guns in each turret instead of 10 pom-pom guns. Still, the Maximum would win. Next up, we have the torpedoes. Now, like the previously mentioned battleship, the G3 does come with torpedoes, 24.5 inches. Next up, we have the armor. Now, knowing the G3, and it's a battlecruiser, it would have less armor value. If you said that, you were right. This ship does have 356mm for belt and barbette and 203mm tower, still giving the edge to the Maximum. Next up, we have its top speed. Now, for a battlecruiser, its top speed is supposed to be high, its armor values are supposed to be lower, and in this case, that's 100% true, coming at a top speed of 32 knots, giving the G3 the edge. Finally, we have the weight. Now, the Tillman still weighs more at 80,000 tons, but the G3 comes in at 49,200 tons. But if you want a battle cruiser, the G3 is in my opinion, a proper battle cruiser. It has the decent armor value, it has a very good top speed, it has a very good main gun and secondary gun to support, and most importantly, it has torpedoes. Though these aren't these are underwater torpedoes. These aren't going to be tube launch torpedoes that are on the deck. So, now, who will win in the fight? Will it be the Tillman class of battleship, or will it be the N3 and the G3 working together? In my opinion, seeing how effective these ships are, I would say that the Tillman IV-2, or the Maximum battleship, would win. It does have better gun placement in my opinion, and if the Tillman were to broadside these ships, then the Tillman would be at a very good advantage. Now, the downside comes in is if the N3 and the G3 are willing to risk it by getting close to the battleship and using their torpedoes. Now, in my opinion, I don't think they will. But it's a good risk to try it because you can aim your bow forward and try and get the Maximum class battleship to ricochet off your bow or just miss entirely. A risk comes in with that rear main gun for the N3 and the G3 as well. Its arc is not good, and most importantly is that the turret armor for both of these ships, for both the Tillman and the G3 and N3, are not the best. So it's down to sheer firepower, and in the sheer firepower category, it goes to the Tillman IV-2 or the Maximum class battleship. Now, let's get on to the ship talk, where I talk to you a little bit more about these ships. The Maximum class of battleship, or the Tillman class of battleship, was a design series designed by a U.S. Senator named Benjamin Tillman, also known as Pitchfork Tillman. Because of this ship, it did help influence the designs of the Pennsylvania class battleship and also the first South Dakota classes of battleship. These were initially prepared in late 1916 and early 1917, and the actual designs were made in around 1918. The only limit that this had was that it could not be as wide as the Panama Canal locks. Everything else could be to his wildest imaginations, and he did. There were ships that ranged from 60,000 tons to 70,000 tons, and this is the heaviest one at 80,000 tons. Some had sextuple turrets, meaning six guns in each turret, and 4 turrets each, with 16-inch guns. This is possibly some of the wildest designs I have seen. This is possibly the wildest design that I've actually seen since the German designs, which is just a larger Bismarck, which is not bad, but this one is just a lot worse. Now, anyways, we have to go to the British, because this ship doesn't have a lot on it, so let's just skip right into the British Empire. The N3 battleship and the G3 battlecruiser were both ships designed for the Royal Navy after World War I, meant to incorporate the lessons learned from that Battle of Jutland. Now, the G3 was designed first, with the N3 coming after, because the purpose of the N3 was to have larger guns and thicker armor, which here it does. Both ships, like the Tillman, were cancelled because of the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty, which didn't just limit the weight, it also limited the main gun armament, which means that both ships, no matter what happened, would be dead in the water. Now, a little bit about these ships. These ships were designed because in 1916, the US declared they would have a navy second to none, with Congress authorizing it, and Japan went on a large fleet building program known as the 8-8 fleet, which is 8 purpose-built battleships and 8 armored cruisers or battlecruisers. The British would turn this into the Revenge class, the Renown class, and the Admiral class, all 3 of those actually being built. Now, the reason why this ship wasn't built is because 1, it was designed after World War I, and 2, because of funding. The British Navy couldn't get the proper funding, and the funds had to go to the civilian populace because of the mobilization. Now, after the Battle of Jutland, the Admiral class was cancelled, which then only left the Hood to be complete. Now, that's going on a separate tangent. These ships would be called into question later on during the Washington Naval Treaty in 1936, but then those would be cancelled. But instead, the Nelson class would actually be built and put into service, and so would the King George V, because they would have better armor and also better turret placement. Anyways, that'll do it for all these ships. Let us put these ships into battle and see who wins. As expected, the Tillman 4 version 2 decimated the N3 and G3 at close ranges. We're now going to move on to 10,000 meters to see if the British can redeem themselves. All honesty, I think the Tillman 4 will still win in this round. As expected, the Tillman 4 version 2 did still win. Now we're going to move on to 20,000 meters, which I think will be a close match, and I do not know who will win this match. Well, that went a little unexpected. I did not think that the British would dominate in that fashion from 20,000 meters. I really did think that the Tillman 4 would put up a bigger fight in the 20,000 meter, especially seeing how they dominated the 10,000 and 5,000 meter. But the British did dominate from their more accurate range findings and the weaker deck armor on the Tillman 4. Anyways, that will do it for this video. We will be keeping the United States for the next video, but we will be leaving the British Empire. So, we will be leaving Britain and going all the way to Russia or the Soviet Union. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please show your support, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.